Yeah.
So I'm constantly trying to find new ways of enticing people to try new comics. When you're talking to me about doing a big loud project, the biggest loudest thing I have would be something related to Walking Dead. It was a Nick Spencer burn. It was a burn to Nick Spencer.
I was really excited for today. When we're recording this, today is
Sure.
a big day for stuff that you've got coming out. Like this video will
That's
come out a
true.
few days later. But the first thing I'd love to talk about was, I think that this is amazing. Okay, sure. Let's talk about Firepower. Let me set this up.
Listening?
I want to talk about both.
Sure.
With Firepower.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is first you've got the Free Comic Book Day book, and at the same time you've got the original graphic novel that's essentially about 6 issues worth of story.
It's almost 8 issues worth of content.
Almost 8 issues worth.
But it's an OGN, so it's like an expand. I can't say that it's like 8 issues worth of story necessarily. It's like an expanded story, but
right.
Whatever. Yeah.
But one thing I've always found interesting is you really have always tried to create good jumping on points for your readers. Even with like long-running series like Walking Dead and Invincible, I think you put a lot more thought into other long-running series where you're trying to create jumping on points. You're trying to make sure that there's different versions of like trade paperbacks or compendiums that come out, and then like either cheap or even free issues to get people to jump on. So what was the thought process with Firepower? Like what was the thought process with how you were going to get like people engaged right away?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge barrier to entry with new comics. Like people in comics, they're comic book fans. I mean, you get into Walking Dead, you read Walking Dead for 16 years. If you're a big fan of Walking Dead, it's going to be very hard for you to, like it kind of annoys me sometimes. Like I'll launch Outcast and people will read the first issue of Outcast and they'll be like, it was pretty good, but it wasn't as good as Walking Dead. And it's like, you've read 15 years of Walking Dead. Don't compare 15 years of Walking Dead to one issue of Outcast. But that's what you're up against. Like you're up against years of investment in a lot of different series, and people that buy comics tend to buy a lot of comics. So it is very difficult to get people to try new comics. And new comics is pretty much all I do now. So I'm constantly trying to find new ways of enticing people to try new comics. And with Firepower, the thought was, you want to get these people invested in these characters as quickly as possible. They're going to be comparing it to, 15 years of Walking Dead. Why not get them to read half a year of Firepower on the first day?
That's amazing.
And, maybe that will get them to be a little bit more invested in these characters in this world and make them a little bit more likely to follow the series and, really love the series. And, when you're working with someone as fast as Chris Samnee, it's a little bit more doable to start with, 154 pages of story in the Prelude OGN and then have a 30-page first issue come out the same day. Before the pandemic, it was supposed to, be the Wednesday before Free Comic Book Day and then Free Comic Book Day. But, we're doing it on the same day since the entire world has completely imploded. So yeah. But I'm hoping that, you get that Prelude OGN and then you get the first issue of the comic and then it's like, oh, man, I totally love these characters and I want to read more. That's, where you want to get with the series as quickly as possible.
I'm a huge fan of Chris Samnee's art. What do you look for in artists when you're starting these new projects? Is there anything particular that you look to connect with?
I mean, I'm a huge comic book fan. I'm a huge comic book art fan. So I think that first and foremost, I want something that's going to excite me because that's what gets me to write the stories. When I sit down to write a script, the thing that charges me up and gets me excited is like, oh my God, I can't wait to see how Lorenzo De Felici interprets this. Or, oh man, Charlie's really going to kick ass on this scene. And Chris Samnee's really going to handle this well. So, you want that charge, which is super important. From project to project, like, you're looking for different things. I mean, I knew Die, Die, Die was going to be an absolutely crazy, ultra-violent book. Chris Burnham has done a number of absolutely crazy, ultra-violent books. And so, that seems like a good fit. You also want to, you want to find things that the artist is going to want to draw. So, with Chris Samnee, I had been hounding him for years. I can be a real pest. There, I think, are some comic book artists out there who do not like me because of how much of a pest I've been over the many, many years about trying to work with them. Stuart Eminem. But you
He's
know, I
best.
will, you know, if I find out you're at a convention, I'll be like, hey, you want to get lunch? You want to get coffee? You want to get
He,
dinner? What are you doing? What are you doing? You want to talk about something? Where are you at now? What do you want to do right
yeah,
now?
yeah.
You got a panel then? What are you doing after the panel? I'm possibly not that annoying unless you're Stuart Eminem, and then I will go full in. But I had some, you know, lunches and things with Chris Samnee, and he was always busy. You know, I'm doing this Black Widow thing soon, and I got to focus on that. No, I really like that. I can't do that. You know, but he eventually contacted me and was like, "Hey, you know, you've been after me for a while. My contract's up at Marvel. I don't know if he necessarily opened with "You've been after me for a while," but maybe. Um, but
You've been
he
after
was like,
me
my
for a
contract's up at
while.
Marvel. I'm looking to do some stuff outside of Marvel. Are you still interested in working with me? And I was like, I absolutely am. And because it was a very like vague and nebulous, like we should do something together, I wasn't coming at him with a specific project. And so I
No,
started, you know, like, you know, do you want to do a dinosaur thing? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Like, what do you like to draw? What do you like to do? And I
yeah.
have a ridiculous Rolodex of like rough ideas. I've probably got like 150 different things that I've like had notions about doing at some point. And
That's what you do
so,
for
you
your
know,
ideas is you put them on like little cards?
no, it's a notepad on my phone that
Just curious
the
about it.
Russians probably have. And it's just literally a list. And like every now and then there'll be 2 sentences. Every now and then there'll be like 40 paragraphs of like different things that I have for an idea. But I have a lot of different, you know, I have a lot of different concepts that I will never get to before I die. It's kind of
Give
depressing
us
when I think
give
about it.
us the high level pitch. Like, what is firepower about? It's new. We don't know
Oh,
what it is.
yeah. No, so Firepower is the story of Owen Johnson, who is a orphan who was adopted in the United States and decides to find out about his birth parents. And the journey to find out about his birth parents leads to him finding out that he is destined to wield this thing called the Firepower that he will then use to save the world. So it's a guy who, you know, really just wants to live his everyday normal life, but is drawn into this insane martial arts world that includes, you know,
Yeah,
fireballs and magical powers and all kinds of crazy stuff.
that's
So it's
dope.
a big, sprawling martial arts adventure.
And then the other thing you have coming out today is I love the story behind this. You've got Negan Lives coming out.
Yep.
Walking Dead. First of all, you surprised everybody by with how it ended. You even surprised
Yep.
me. Like I had no idea that that was about to end. Well, some of the stories seemed to be coming to a closing point, but I was still surprised. I was
Yeah.
still, you know, you didn't even do it at like an even 200 issues or anything. You surprised everyone. You said the comic is done. But the reason you're coming back to do this Negan Lives is, I guess, to help the comic book stores because of the current pandemic. Do I have that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because of the pandemic, there was a large period of time where stores were closed and Diamond wasn't distributing books. You know, there's a concern about getting people back into stores. You know, now that some stores are open, doing, you know, curbside and you know, delivery and different things like that.
Yeah.
You know, there was a call. It was Bill Shanus, who used to work at Diamond, who was on the phone with Eric Stevenson and I talking about like, you know, I'm talking to publishers about like trying to do big loud projects, trying to get people back into stores. And, you know, when you're talking to me about doing a big loud project, the biggest, loudest thing I have would be something related to Walking Dead. And I knew that Steve Jeppy was doing the Back the Comeback
Sure.
campaign to try and get people to, you know, focus on like supporting comic book shops because it's rough out there for, you know, independent retail
I've
stores.
been interviewing
Um,
stores on my show lately just to see how they're handling it. It really is rough, and whatever we can do to support them is definitely important, I think, to keeping our medium healthy.
yeah, and so, you know, when we were talking about the possibility of doing something like that, then I start to get excited creatively because I'm like, well, you know, it's a good excuse to like do something cool with Negan. You know, like I love that character. I didn't write him for the last like 2 years of the Walking Dead comic because issue 174 was, you know, kind of his like send off.
It went off, yeah.
You know, people didn't know that at the time. I used to joke in the letters column about like, well, you'll never see Negan again. Like that's it for Negan. And then people write in and be like, you're kidding, right? I'd be like, no, I'm definitely not kidding. That is all you will see of Negan. And people didn't know that the book was ending at 193, so they'd be like,
Right.
I don't believe him. You know, I missed that character, and creatively, I was like, oh, you know, if Charlie and I could come back and do this thing, and The other thing that was really exciting is that Charlie is lightning fast. And so like, I think it was the end of April when I was like, hey, let's talk about doing this.
Wow,
And then 3 or 4 weeks later, like the book was done
that's
and,
amazing.
going through pre-press and setting everything up. I get a charge from that still, like the whole idea of like, oh, you come from nothing and then you have a comic book. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. And I thought it would be a good thing to, try and help out stores, try and drive people back into stores. The retail community, the direct market retail community, you know, is another one of those things that I owe my current life to. Like, they got behind Walking Dead and supported it years before the television show.
Right.
Walking Dead was a massive success. The
It
Walking
was a
Dead
black and
television
white comic.
show, yeah, and the Walking Dead television show would not exist as it is if I didn't have the stability that the direct market had given my life with the success of the comic book. So I was able to just sit back and say no until the perfect, opportunity arose. If the comic book hadn't been successful, I probably would have been
Right.
like, I don't care, make a show out of anything. Like, I just need to eat.
And
But because I had that stability that the direct market afforded me, that led to the show actually being good, which absolutely changed my life. So I owe them absolutely everything. So anything I could do to help out a store that's in need, like, I'm definitely going to do.
yeah, and there's two pieces that I want to follow up on. One is
Sure.
I read this in a news article that like that you were either giving it to them or giving it to them at cost, something like that, so that they can like it can help them, right? Isn't that the idea behind it?
Yeah. We're trying to promote that carefully because we don't want people going into the stores going, I heard this was free,
No,
because it's not free to customers. But
no.
this will be days later by the time this is out. But no, I mean,
Right. But I'm just saying that it's
Charlie and I
something to
did
help
the
comic book stores. It's a comic
yeah.
book that there's always a cost involved with the production behind the scenes, and you're trying
Oh no,
to
but
absorb
what I'm
some of
saying
that.
is, it's 100% free to stores. So every dollar that
Wow.
gets generated from this comic book uh, goes to the stores, is kept by the stores. Diamond worked very closely with us to cover shipping. So a lot of times the comic book stores have to cover shipping. Diamond is covering the shipping, so the comic book stores don't have to do that. I am covering the printing of the book. Charlie Adlard and I donated our work to the book. So, all the production, everything at Skybound is just being, paid for through people's salaries. That's
That's
not being
amazing.
charged off on anything.
That
So
that
yeah, when you buy that book for $4.99,
you're helping a
that
comic book
4.99
store.
is going directly to the retailer. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to put out there is that like if you out there maybe for some reason you haven't even read Walking Dead, this is still a tremendous way that you could like try something and help your comic book store specifically. Like that's a pretty amazing ability that like we could buy a comic at the same price that basically any comic is going to be, and you're going to be helping your comic book store a lot.
Yeah. And hopefully while you're there, buy something else. There's probably
Like
going to be a lot of other
firepower.
stuff that you might find interesting,
Exactly
like
right.
firepower, for instance.
I thought you were going there, so I thought I'd
No,
cut you
no.
off. But no, you've always, and this was my second part to that is, not everybody would know this, but like at conventions and stuff, you will often have a skybound sort of like power breakfast or something with retailers to find out what they're interested in and what their needs are and stuff. So you've
Yeah.
always been like, because that's in some ways, yes, readers are your ultimate audience, but initially the retail stores are your first audience. You need to sell the book to them. And it's always been interesting that you've set up forums so that you can listen to them.
Yeah, I mean, those things are great. Every San Diego Comic Con and every New York Comic Con, it's been a breakfast in the past. Sometimes it's a cocktail hour later in the day. But we have like anywhere between 30 to 100 retailers that we rent out a restaurant or a banquet hall or some kind of area, and we serve some food. We have like some kind of a very brief slideshow presentation about things that are coming up. We talk about things that aren't going to be announced for like 6 months sometimes. And it's really cool that I've got this relationship with these retailers where they know, like, look, I'm risking by telling you this. I don't want these things to leak, but you're my retail partner. You guys are going to be carrying this stuff. We want you to know about this stuff coming. So every now and then I'll, show a trailer for something that hasn't been announced or isn't being shown. And, like like Super Dinosaur, for instance, like I was showing them clips from Super Dinosaur like years before that cartoon came out. Yeah, exactly. Thanks for the support. But And but then we had like this big Q&A, and I just sit there and, you know, I'll ask them questions and they'll ask me questions, and we have a
Yeah.
conversation about things. And the launch of Firepower actually came from that.
Okay.
Again, the pandemic kind of messed it up, but they were like, you know, Free Comic Book Day is this great event that drives a lot of people into our stores, and we have all these free comic books that the publishers provide us with. But like, if we had a high ticket item or something rare or something cool that we could actually sell that was debuting on Free Comic Book Day, it'd be nice to have something to sell to all those people that are coming in for the free comics.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's when I had the idea of like, oh, if I launched a book with an OGN that you could sell with the Free Comic Book Day, like first issue, like that would be kind of a cool thing. And so the
Amazing.
idea was, when people flood into comic book shops on Free Comic Book Day, they would get Firepower issue 1, but they could also buy the Prelude OGN.
Yeah.
Didn't quite work out. So I'll have to do that again at some
We'll
point in
see
the
how it
future with a
goes this
different book
week.
to see if it works. Yeah. No, I mean, I think this is the best compromise that we could have come up with. So,
Absolutely. It's
and so
exciting.
far, I hear it's going really well.
That's exciting to hear. I love hearing that you listen to and try to like work with these retail stores like that. And I think it's part of how you have success, because you're actually listening to what people want. You're still doing what you want, but you're aware that you're not creating something that like, you know, people are saying like, here's what I don't want. I don't know. It's impressive. Not
No, I
everybody
mean,
listens to.
it's that thing. It's that thing. I mean, it almost goes back to my time at Marvel. It's like, these retailers are on the ground. They know what they're talking about. They know what they're
Yeah.
doing. They're passionate about this industry. If they want to yell at me for something that I did wrong, I need to listen to them. And if they want to like give me a suggestion, I need to listen to them. It's
Right.
my job to know, like, okay, this retailer doesn't really understand what goes into publishing, so I can't really listen to everything he said. But there's always valuable information, even,
Yeah.
you know, when sometimes they're, you know, like not 100% informed on things. 9 times out of 10, like, the things that these retailers say to me, I'm like, oh shit, like, I've never even considered that. Like, I had never even thought about that perspective on releasing comics, or how the customer sees the comics, or things like that. And I'll take notes. I'm like, oh my god, like, this is such
I
useful
mean,
information. Like, it's really great to have that exchange.
and I assume that's why we've seen things like, you know, like reprintings of Walking Dead or Invincible for like a quarter and stuff like that, so that like people could jump into those series. Have you ever like looked at like, you
And
know,
I should say, I got to interrupt. I'm not that special. Like, this is stuff that Eric Stevenson's been doing. This is
sure,
stuff that Image has been doing as a whole. Like, it's not like I invented the concept of listening to retailers. Like,
and
you know,
thank you
Image is a
for
very
making
great
that
company
clear.
as a whole. You know, for doing that stuff.
At the same time, not everybody does that. Like certainly not every writer does that.
No,
Certainly not every publisher does that. So that's, I'm just saying that it is
yeah.
impressive that you listen to them. What I'm curious about though, like we look at comics and the price per issue is getting pretty pricey. Have you ever looked into, you know, like printing them maybe closer to the way that you and I grew up, where they were like on newsprint? I mean, obviously the coloring techniques would have to be different. Or have you looked at like trying to do something like, you know, a weekly anthology like they do in Japan? Do you ever look at like some of these alternate ways and like see if that might be something we should be doing?
Yes, constantly. There are, I want to say, 3 different things that I'm working on behind the scenes right now. You know, printing bigger books that
Yeah.
per issue, the stories you're getting are much cheaper than the cover price of the normal size comics. I'm trying not to reveal too much.
No, I
Different kind of
understand.
printing techniques. It's harder. It's harder to go back to the printing techniques of the 90s, because so few people are using the cheaper paper. The cheaper paper is scarcer, and therefore it is more expensive
Okay.
than some of the paper
That's
options
not
that we're
a,
using now that are
that's off the
better.
table
And
basically.
so, possibly, but we're still looking into that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, you know, producing stories of different length, so that the
Yeah.
you know, time needed to put those out is a little less, so that the cover price can be a little lower. You know, this is the kind of stuff that, you know, we're always exploring behind the scenes, and it's something that
It's
Eric
great to
Stevenson and
hear.
I are talking about all the time. So yeah, you'll probably see some stuff like that in the next like 2-3 years. You know, assuming we all make it through this pandemic.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah. Yeah. Aliens are going to come here and they're going to read Walking Dead and be like, oh, the humans knew this was all coming. Those
Uh,
idiots. Those
I
idiots.
just wish the aliens would come and fix things at this point.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Uh,
That would be nice. Well, let's try to end on something a little bit positive. And I was just curious.
no,
You,
no, I don't
you
want to. Let's go more negative. Let's think of something.
screw everything. Thank you.
Destroy all the coastline, and then the solar flare is going to completely scorch the surface of the earth, and what's the Mount
So
Rainier is going
dark.
to
So
blow up
dark.
and take out the western half of the United States. So just what's
I'm
going on?
curious. I'm curious. What in comics kind of excites you these days, or maybe even outside of comics that inspires comics, but like
I
what
think
gets you up in the morning that is exciting you these days? Like what makes you still want to keep
yeah.
doing this? What
I'm
are some
old.
inspirations and
I'm
influence?
old, so there are names that I'm not going to be able to come up with. But like the thing that excites me the most about comics right now is Andrew McLean, Daniel Warren Johnson,
Yeah,
Ed Piskor, Jim Rugg, the
good
new
guys.
writer artists in
Yeah,
comics, the guys that are writing their own stories and drawing their own stories. I think that there's been too long of a period in comics where artists are not necessarily like writing their own comics. And I think that if you look back over history, there's all the Image guys, but there's also, Frank Miller, John Byrne, Walt Simonson. All of these guys produced all of their best work when they were writing their own stories. And I think that that's
definitely.
something that, it's something that we encourage at Skybound. We talk to artists all the time and we're like, if you've got an idea, like we'll totally support you writing and drawing your own book. Like, totally happy to do that. I think that's an important thing for the industry. And that's the thing I'm most excited about coming back. I mean, Paul Azaceta, we're wrapping up Outcast. He's talking about writing his own comic. Very excited about that. There are plenty of
Great.
artists for me to work with as a writer. Like, I'm definitely not scared of being like, taken out of this industry by all these artists wanting to write their own stories. I think Ryan Otley has written some things for himself in the past, and they're like super awesome. I would encourage him to do more of that stuff.
Yeah.
The world has enough boring Spider-Man comics. That's a Nick Spencer
How do you
burn,
go from
but
complimenting Utley to like saying the world has enough boring Spider-Man comics? He's doing some great stuff on Spider-Man right
no,
now.
it was a Nick Spencer burn. It was a burn to Nick Spencer. I have talked about this with Nick Spencer directly. He is not writing enough action scenes for Ryan Otley on Spider-Man. I have scolded him for this. He should be ashamed of himself.
You're on
Sorry,
blast, Nick
what was that?
Spencer.
But just kidding.
That's the comic tropes
It's all
on
in good fun.
blast.
It's all in good fun.
No,
But
that's great.
but but yeah, I mean, I think that that's what I'm most excited about in comics right now is people writing and drawing their own stories.
I feel like people sometimes talk about like, oh, this was the golden age of comics, or this was like the dark period, and I feel like every period of comics always has a certain amount of great creators. Every period, like
Yeah,
even when like things were in a various slumps and recessions, you're finding people that are passionate, and you just have to look closer. Yeah, there is sometimes crap. There's kind of always crap, but there's also really good stuff. I've never found an era of comics that I feel like is bad. That maybe there's bad trends, but there's always good comics if you look closely. There really are. And I'm very excited about some of the same people you said, like, just discovering guys like, I've promoted cartoonist kayfabe since they started. Those Piskor and Rugg are great. I love their stuff. I love Daniel Warren Johnson these days. The stuff he comes up with himself, like the Wonder Woman and Murder
yeah.
Falcon. It's really exciting. So that's exciting to hear that you're still excited, man. Thank you so much for your time today. I thank you for the stories and stuff. There's a lot that people can learn. I still think of you as young, but you've been doing this for 20 years. You've
I
been doing
don't
this for
feel
20
young.
years. There's a lot we can learn. And
Sure.
my personal thing, I hope someday you consider doing some more humor comics. That's my personal
I
thing.
have always maintained that I started my career with Battle Pope and I will end my career with Battle Pope. So when I get to a point where no one buys my work anymore and I'm completely washed up and no one
Okay,
wants anything from me,
that's
I
not
will
gonna.
go, well, I guess it's time to do 4 or 5 more issues of Battle Pope before I die.
That's awesome. No, it's great. I just and it doesn't even have to be Battle Pope. I just have always found you like. I think you've got an amazing sense of humor, and I wish more people knew about that. But thank you so
There's some
much for
funny
talking
stuff in
to us about
Firepower. Sorry, I'm
Firepower.
just going to keep interrupting your outros. Firepower's got some funny stuff. Try that. But anyway,
Firepower. Firepower has funny stuff. if I had a budget, this would be where a big firepower logo just sort of goes boom, and there you go. There's your ad. Look at that. That's as close as we're gonna get. That's as close as we're gonna get on a YouTube budget for now. Maybe next year I can afford a graphics artist. All
Turn
right.
this into a jet.
Whoa! Look at that! Look at that! The Sharpie jet. All right, man. I sincerely appreciate your time. I hope this week goes well for you. Thank you so much. Continued success, okay?
All right, man. Thanks a lot. It was great talking to you.